She sold handmade bracelets on the corner, then recognized the man in the limo. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the city streets, casting a warm glow on the cracked pavement beneath little Amelia's sandals. Her wrists jingled with handmade bracelets of every color imaginable, tiny works of art she'd spent the night before crafting beside her grandmother. She stood at her usual spot, corner of 7th and Elms, a folding stool barely taller than her knees propped beside a tattered cardboard sign that read, "Bracelets 2 for $1, made with love." Amelia's eyes sparkled with quiet determination as she smiled up at each passerby. "Would you like a bracelet, Mom? They bring good luck," she chirped, with the kind of hope only a child could carry so confidently. Most ignored her. A few smiled politely, dropping coins into her worn mason jar. The city bustled past her, too busy to notice the miracle waiting to unfold. Behind her, Mrs. Carter's flower shop opened its doors, releasing a waft of lavender into the morning air. "Morning, Amy," the woman called, waving cheerfully. Amelia waved back with both arms, her bangles catching the sunlight. She wasn't just selling bracelets. She was searching. Every morning, for as long as she could remember, she watched faces, hundreds of them, hoping one might match the one from the crumpled photo hidden in her pocket. Her grandmother had told her stories about a man who'd once worn a necklace just like hers, a silver chain with a tiny blue stone in the center, etched with a single letter, R. It was the only thing Amelia had left from her parents. Her mother had died giving birth. Her father was a mystery wrapped in silence and secrets. Traffic slowed as the lunch hour neared. Amelia turned toward the street just as a sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb, idling beside her little stool. She tilted her head, confused. Limousines didn't stop here. Her neighborhood was the kind where people passed through with windows rolled up and doors locked. But this one stayed. Slowly, the tinted window rolled down. Inside sat a man in a tailored navy suit. His salt and pepper hair was swept back, his expression calm yet piercing. He looked out with tired eyes that scanned the street until they landed on her. A long second passed, then Amelia's gaze dropped to something around his neck. A necklace, silver chain, blue stone, etched with the letter R. Her breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled, bracelets clinking like tiny bells. The man leaned closer, his face pale, lips slightly parted. You're wearing her necklace," he whispered. Amelia blinked. "It's mine," she replied, barely audible. He stared at her, stunned. "No, it was hers. My daughter's." The air around them went still, like the city had suddenly gone silent. Amelia's lips quivered. "My mommy's name was Rachel," she said. His hands trembled as they clutched the edge of the window. "Rachel was my daughter." And in that instant, the world tilted beneath them both. The silence stretched for what felt like eternity, broken only by the hum of the limo's engine and the distant honk of a delivery truck. Amelia's heart pounded in her tiny chest, her mind spinning with confusion and something else, something that felt like recognition deep in her bones. She stared at the man, her small fingers gripping the pendant that had always rested against her heart, suddenly heavier than ever. Inside the limousine, Richard Harrington III, real estate mogul and billionaire philanthropist, felt like the breath had been ripped from his lungs. He hadn't heard the name Rachel spoken aloud in nearly a decade. It was a name he'd buried, along with every photograph and memory after her sudden disappearance. She had vanished 8 years ago, pregnant and heartbroken after they'd fought. He had never forgiven himself, not for the words spoken that night, not for refusing to accept the man she loved, not for the silence that followed. His hand reached out, trembling, fingers grazing the air as if trying to touch a ghost. "Your mother, Rachel, where is she?" His voice cracked. Amelia looked down, then away. "She died when I was born, that's what my nana says." Her eyes returned to him, searching. "Do you know her?" Richard leaned back slightly, stunned. The world outside blurred as memories surged forward. Rachel as a little girl, chasing butterflies on the estate lawn, her laugh echoing through marble halls, her final words shouted across their last argument, "If you can't accept my child, you'll never see us again." "I knew her," he whispered. "She was my daughter." "As that means you—" He stopped, unable to say it. Amelia nodded slowly. "You're my grandpa?" The word hit him like a tidal wave. Grandpa, a word he'd never expected to hear. Not again. Not like this. Before he could answer, the driver leaned back through the partition. "Sir, are we still heading to the conference?" Richard barely heard him. He waved him off without looking away from Amelia. Then he opened the car door himself and stepped out, his polished shoes meeting the dusty sidewalk like a prince descending from a forgotten throne. His presence towered over the street, elegant and foreign, but his eyes softened as he knelt before the little girl. "May I see it?" he asked, gesturing to her necklace. She hesitated, then lifted it gently. The tiny blue stone caught the light, its surface slightly worn from years of touch. He pulled his own pendant from beneath his shirt and placed it beside hers. Identical. A custom set Rachel had once received from her late mother, one for her and one for the future grandchild Richard had never met. Tears welled in his eyes. "It's really you." Amelia stared at him, voice small. "Why didn't you ever come for me?" His face crumpled. "Because I didn't know you existed." Amelia's eyes filled with questions far too big for her 8-year-old heart to understand. Her tiny fingers fidgeted with the edge of her bracelet, tracing the familiar knots and beads as though they held answers. The man, her grandfather, was real, flesh and blood. Not just a figure from bedtime stories or unanswered prayers whispered into her pillow. And now here he was, standing before her like something pulled straight from the folds of a dream. Richard could barely process what he was seeing. The girl's features mirrored Rachel's so perfectly, it was like time had rewound. Her eyes, a deep hazel, shimmered with that same spark he remembered from his daughter's younger days. Her curls, her smile, even the tilt of her chin, he could see Rachel in every inch of her. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Amelia," she said, her voice still cautious. He nodded slowly, tasting the name. "Amelia. That's beautiful. Did your mother choose it?" Amelia gave a small shrug. "Nana says Mama wrote it down before I was born. She said Mama wanted me to be strong and kind like a real lady." Richard let out a shaky breath. She got her wish. For a moment, they just stood there, strangers bound by blood and history, separated by silence and years. Richard looked around, suddenly aware of the street they were on. The graffiti-tagged walls, the distant sirens, the clatter of a world far removed from his own. Guilt pierced him like a blade. His granddaughter had been here all along, selling bracelets, living without the comfort of a home he could have given her 10 times over. "Do you live nearby?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. Amelia pointed across the street to a crumbling brick building. "Up there, 3rd floor, with Nana June." A mix of sorrow and disbelief washed over him. "Nana June? June Thompson?" She nodded. "She took care of me since I was born. She's Mama's best friend." Richard's jaw clenched. He hadn't heard that name in years. June had once been like family, until Rachel's disappearance tore everyone apart. "I need to talk to her," he said quickly. "Please, can you take me to her?" Amelia hesitated, clutching her bracelet bag close. She doesn't like strangers, especially men in suits. "I understand," he replied gently, "but I'm not a stranger anymore. I'm your family." She looked at him long and hard. Then, after a moment's pause, she nodded and turned, leading him toward the crosswalk. As they waited for the light to change, Richard glanced down at the child beside him, his granddaughter, and felt a strange surge of something unfamiliar. Hope, maybe, or redemption. But neither of them noticed the figure watching from the alley behind them. A shadowed man in a baseball cap, his eyes locked on Richard, and his hands clenched into fists. Amelia held Richard's hand tightly as they crossed the street, her small fingers swallowed by his larger, trembling ones. The man beside her might have looked powerful and untouchable in his expensive suit, but his grip betrayed him. There was fear there, regret, maybe even shame. Amelia couldn't name the feelings, but she could feel them buzzing through his skin like electricity. They climbed the narrow, creaking stairs of the old building, the walls stained by years of city life. Every step echoed like a drumbeat in Richard's chest. With each floor, the air grew heavier. He hadn't stepped foot in a place like this in decades, not since before the Empire, before the headlines and private jets, and now it was bringing him face to face with the ghosts he'd tried to forget. At the third-floor landing, Amelia stopped in front of a peeling blue door with a crooked number 3C. She knocked twice, then paused. "Nana?" she called out softly. "I brought someone." There was a shuffle of feet from within. A lock turned. Then the door creaked open just a few inches, revealing a sharp pair of eyes behind a chain lock. June Thompson's gaze narrowed when it landed on Richard. "You," she breathed, voice thick with disbelief and something darker. "What the hell are you doing here?" Richard's lips parted, but no sound came. "He's my grandpa," Amelia said simply, lifting her necklace. "He has one too." June's eyes darted between the girl and the man, then to the necklace glinting against Richard's chest. For a moment, time stood still. Then she slammed the door shut. The clack of the chain echoed. Then the door opened again. Wide this time. June stood framed in the doorway, still wearing her apron from the morning shift at the diner, flour smudged on her sleeve. Her expression was carved in stone, but her eyes shimmered with the fire of old wounds. "I should slam this door in your face," she said. "I wouldn't blame you," Richard replied, voice low. June turned to Amelia. "Go wash your hands, baby, I'll talk to him." Amelia glanced between them, reluctant but obeyed. As she disappeared into the apartment, June stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind her. "You don't get to show up here and pretend to be a hero," she snapped, her voice a whisper so Amelia wouldn't hear. "You kicked your daughter out like she was garbage. You never even looked for her." "I didn't know she had the baby," Richard said. "I didn't know because you didn't want to know," June shot back. Richard swallowed the lump in his throat. "I came because I saw her, and I knew. One look at her and I knew she was mine, Rachel's. I want to do right by her." June studied him for a long time. Her face was unreadable. "Too late for Rachel," she said coldly, "but maybe not for Amelia." Before he could answer, a loud crash echoed from the alley below, followed by the screech of tires and Amelia's scream. The hallway erupted in motion. Richard bolted down the stairs with a speed that belied his age, heart hammering in his chest. June wasn't far behind, her apron flapping as she flew after him. The echoes of Amelia's scream still rang in his ears, shredding through every nerve, every breath. He didn't think. He couldn't. There was only one thought pulsing in his mind. Not again. Not another daughter. Not this child, too. They burst out onto the sidewalk. Across the street, people were shouting and scattering, pointing toward the alley where the limousine had parked. The black vehicle sat at an angle now, its back door flung open. But Amelia was gone. "Amelia!" Richard shouted, his voice breaking. A man in a mechanic's uniform came running from the corner. "They took her!" he yelled. "Some guy grabbed her, shoved her into a white van, headed down 8th. June's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a cry. "No. Oh God, no." Richard didn't hesitate. He turned and sprinted to the limo, yelling at the driver, "Follow that van now!" But the limo's driver stood outside, dazed and bruised. "They knocked me out. Took my phone." June stumbled back, her knees buckling as she leaned against the wall. "Who would do this?" she whispered. Richard stared down the street, the white van already gone from sight. "Someone who knew I'd be here," he muttered. "Someone who was watching." June's eyes narrowed. "You think this has something to do with you?" He nodded grimly. "I've made enemies, more than I care to admit. Business deals, lawsuits, people I've crushed." His voice faltered. "But none of them ever had reason to go after my family." "Until now," June said, her voice like ice. Richard ran a hand through his hair, trembling. "We need to call the police." June nodded numbly, pulling out her phone. As she dialed, Richard paced, scanning every car, every corner, praying for a glimpse of Amelia's curls, her bracelets jingling. Anything. But there was nothing, just the empty street. The silence, the weight of failure pressing down. Then, just as the dispatcher answered June's call, Richard's own phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A distorted voice crackled through. "Mr. Harrington, we have the girl." Richard's blood froze. "Don't speak." "Don't call the cops, don't move, you'll receive instructions soon." The line went dead. He stared at the screen in disbelief, then slowly lowered the phone. "What did they say?" June asked, her face pale. Richard looked up, his voice hollow. "They have her, and they knew my name." June's eyes filled with tears. "They took an 8-year-old girl. For revenge?" "No," Richard said, fists clenched. "They took my granddaughter." He turned toward the city skyline, a fire reigniting behind his eyes. "And I swear, I will burn the world to get her back." The police arrived within minutes, their flashing lights painting streaks of red and blue across the cracked sidewalk. Officers canvassed the scene, questioning pedestrians, jotting down notes, and relaying information over radios. But to Richard, it all felt too slow, too procedural. Amelia was out there, scared, alone, maybe in danger, and every second that passed stretched like an eternity. He stood stiffly beside June, who paced with frantic energy, alternating between rage and panic. The officers had already taken her statement. Now she clutched a damp washcloth in one hand, wiping her flour-streaked arms as though she could scrub away the fear. Detective Mendez, a seasoned woman with tired eyes and a crisp suit, approached them. "We've got traffic cam footage confirming a white van heading south on 8th. No plates. Likely stolen. We're running it through other surveillance points now." Richard nodded slowly, jaw clenched. "I got a call," he said, handing her his phone. "They warned me not to contact the police. I did anyway." Mendez studied him, her tone firm, but not unkind. "That kind of threat usually means one thing. They want something." June stepped forward, her voice breaking. "They don't know Amelia. She's just a child. She doesn't deserve this." "No child does," Mendez replied, glancing at the screen. "We'll do everything we can." But Richard wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at the street, seeing not the present but the past. Rachel's face, her last words, the necklace, the choice he made to push her away. Now Amelia, her daughter, had been taken right from under his protection. Again. Suddenly a realization struck him. The timing, the location, the limo. Someone knew he would be here. He turned to June, urgency tightening his voice. "I think this was planned. They knew about her necklace, knew she was connected to me. What if this isn't just random revenge?" June narrowed her eyes. "You think someone's been watching her?" Richard nodded grimly. "Or me. Someone who wanted to hurt me through her." Just then, a second phone buzzed in his jacket. Not his usual number. This one was a secure line, used only for corporate business. He hadn't used it in weeks. Unknown number again. He answered, and the same distorted voice returned. "You didn't listen. But it's not too late to fix this." "What do you want?" Richard growled. There was a pause, then, "Everything you owe. Everything you stole. We'll be in touch." The line went dead. Richard's face turned ashen. June grabbed his arm. "What did they say?" He looked at her slowly. "They don't just want money." A chill passed through him. "They want to destroy me, from the inside out." And Amelia was just the beginning. The hours crawled by like ghosts through fog, each one heavier than the last. June sat on the edge of her faded couch, her hands wringing a dish towel as if it could squeeze away her terror. Richard paced the floor of her small apartment, phone in hand, waiting for a second call, a message, anything. The walls felt too close, the silence between them too loud. Every minute without Amelia was a needle driven deeper into their hearts. Detective Mendez had left with promises of updates, and a tech team was now tracking the call logs. But Richard wasn't satisfied with waiting. He had resources far beyond the police, men who owed him favors, companies that could trace calls, break encryptions, find faces in a sea of shadows. He made a few quiet calls of his own, but the voice inside him, deeper than pride or power, kept whispering that he was too late. That once again, he had failed the one person who needed him most. June broke the silence. "You said they don't just want money. What did you mean?" Richard stopped pacing. His shoulders dropped as he looked at her. "Years ago, I made a deal with a man named Carter Voss. He was dirty, but he helped build my company from the ground up. We parted ways when I exposed his fraud. He lost everything. And now you think he's back?" "I know he is," Richard said. The voice on the phone, it was altered, but there was a tone, a cadence. It was him. June's eyes narrowed. Why wait all these years? Richard hesitated. Because until today, he didn't know about Amelia. June swallowed hard. "So he's using her to get back at you?" He nodded. "And he's not the kind of man who plays fair. He'll want to hurt me the way he was hurt, publicly, personally." "And if you give him what he wants?" Richard didn't answer at first. He just stared at the floor. "He'll ruin my name, my business, maybe even my freedom, but I'll give it all up, every last dollar, if it means bringing her home." The conviction in his voice shook June. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Love. Raw, desperate, and real. Before she could speak, Richard's phone vibrated again. This time, it was a text. No sender, no subject, just a photo. Amelia, blindfolded, sitting on a mattress in a dark room, hands bound, her bracelets still clinging to her wrists. June gasped, covering her mouth. "Oh my God!" Another message came seconds later. "You have 48 hours, or she disappears." Richard stared at the screen, his hands shaking. Then, beneath the message, a link appeared. He clicked it, and a video began to play. Amelia's voice echoed through the room. "Grandpa, are you there?" Amelia's voice, small and uncertain, crackled through the speaker. The video was grainy, filmed in low light. She sat against a bare wall, the mattress beneath her stained and thin, her curls slightly tangled, but her face, so brave, held steady. She was trying not to cry, but her voice trembled. "I don't know where I am, Ed, but the man said you'd see this. He said you were my grandpa. Is that true?" She looked directly into the lens, her tiny brow furrowed. "I was going to sell 2 more bracelets today. Then I was going to buy Nana her favorite tea." June sobbed quietly into her hands, unable to look at the screen anymore. Richard knelt beside the table, his phone still gripped in one hand, the other pressed tightly to his mouth to silence the roar of anguish in his chest. Amelia's voice continued, softer now. "He said bad things about you. Said you didn't care about Mama, but I don't believe him. You looked at me like you knew me, like you missed me before we even met." She sniffed, then forced a small smile. "I think Mama would want me to believe in you." The screen went black. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard stood slowly, rage and sorrow boiling behind his eyes. "This ends now," he said, his voice a whisper that promised thunder. "I'm going to get her back." June wiped her tears. "How? You don't even know where she is." "I will," he said. "I know the kind of man Voss is. He's theatrical. He wants to prove he's smarter than me. He'll leave clues, just enough for me to follow." "You think this is a game to him?" she asked, horrified. "No," Richard replied coldly. "It's vengeance." He grabbed his coat and phone. "I need access to my files, off the grid. I know someone who can help trace the location through the video metadata." "I'm coming with you," June said, grabbing her purse. He shook his head. "No. If he sees both of us gone, he might panic. He's watching. Stay here in case they contact again." June hesitated, torn, but she saw the steel in his eyes. Richard leaned down, gripping her shoulder. "I swear to you, I'll bring her back, whatever it takes." He walked to the door, pausing before opening it. "I lost Rachel because I didn't fight hard enough," he said. "I won't lose Amelia." As he disappeared into the hallway, June sat back on the couch, the silence around her now thick with dread. Her eyes drifted to Amelia's bracelet bag, left behind in the rush. She picked it up gently. Inside, among the beads and strings, was a tiny scrap of folded paper she hadn't noticed before, written in Amelia's handwriting. "If I get lost, follow the stars." The note sat in June's hand like a whisper from beyond the shadows, innocent yet pulsing with urgency. "If I get lost, follow the stars." Her heart thudded. It sounded like a child's game, but Amelia didn't leave things by accident. That little girl was observant, clever, and deeply rooted in the stories June had told her since she was old enough to speak. Stories of her mother, of the necklace, of the stars. June opened the window and stared up at the fading city skyline, the stars barely visible beyond the orange glow of streetlights. Her mind raced. Follow the stars. What stars? What had Amelia meant? Then it hit her. The mural. Just 2 blocks from their building, painted on the side of an old theater, was a massive mural of constellations. Amelia called it her star wall. She used to sit beneath it after school, pretending she was an astronaut, or that the stars were leading her to her mother in heaven. It had been their quiet place. June jumped to her feet, grabbing her coat. She had no proof, no logic, but something deep in her gut screamed that the mural mattered. She hurried through the streets, weaving through late-night stragglers and neon lights. When she turned the corner onto Lincoln Avenue, the mural came into view. Swirling blues and purples, a sky full of stars painted across brick. She stood before it, eyes scanning every inch. And then she saw it. In the bottom right corner, tucked into the outline of the constellation Cassiopeia, was a symbol she hadn't noticed before. A tiny R, the same one etched on Amelia's necklace. Her breath caught. Someone had added it recently. The paint was fresh. She stepped closer, hand reaching out to touch it. Just below the R, someone had scrawled a message in faint white chalk. "Third star, east of Eden." She stared, pulse pounding. What did it mean? She pulled out her phone and called Richard. He answered on the first ring. "June? Did they call again?" "No. But I found something. A clue, maybe. A message near the mural Amelia loved. It says third star, east of Eden." There was a pause on the line. Then Richard spoke, voice laced with recognition. "East of Eden, that was the name of a property Voss tried to buy from me years ago. I outbid him. It's a warehouse now. He never forgave me." "Where is it?" "East Brooklyn, near the docks." June's breath hitched. "Do you think she's there?" "I don't believe in coincidences anymore," Richard said. "I'm going now." "Wait, I'm coming." "No," he said firmly. "You've done enough. If this is a trap, I won't risk you too." June hesitated, torn but relented. As Richard ended the call and headed toward the parking garage, a low hum echoed in the distance. In the shadows behind the mural, someone was watching, and they were already dialing a number. "She found the message," the voice said. "Good," came the reply. "Let her think she's helping." A pause. "We'll use her next." Richard arrived at the old warehouse just after midnight. The building loomed against the waterfront like a forgotten relic, its steel siding rusted, the windows either broken or boarded. He parked far enough to avoid notice, slipping into the shadows with a flashlight and something heavier tucked into his coat pocket. His breath clouded in the cool night air, but sweat dampened his collar. Every instinct in him screamed caution, but the image of Amelia's blindfolded face pushed him forward. He circled the building, searching for a way in. The main doors were padlocked, but around the back he found a side entrance slightly ajar. Someone had left it open on purpose. He stepped inside. The interior was vast and dark, lit only by the moon spilling through cracks in the ceiling. Empty crates lined the walls. Dust swirled in the beam of his flashlight. He moved cautiously, scanning every corner, every sound. His phone buzzed again. Another message. "Getting warmer, Mr. Harrington." He typed back furiously. "Where is she? Show me." No response. Then from deeper within the warehouse came a soft sound, a jingle, metal clinking against metal. Bracelets. He ran toward the sound, nearly tripping over a discarded pipe. At the far end of the room, a figure crouched near a support beam. Tiny. Still. "Amelia!" he shouted, racing forward. The figure flinched, then turned toward him. It wasn't Amelia. It was a mannequin, dressed in a child's hoodie and wearing a wig of dark curls. On its wrist, bracelets. Amelia's. Tied crudely with fishing wire. A cruel decoy. His heart sank. Then he saw the red dot flickering on the wall beside him. Laser sight. He dove to the side, just as a shot rang out, the bullet slicing through the air where his head had been seconds before. He rolled behind a crate, heart thundering, pulling the gun from his coat. Another shot rang out, splintering wood inches from his leg. A voice echoed through the warehouse, distorted but familiar. "I warned you not to come alone, Harrington." "Where is she?" Richard roared, ducking behind a metal shelf. "She's alive, Faye, for now," the voice replied, "but every move you make brings her closer to disappearing forever." Richard gritted his teeth. "You want money? Fine. I'll wire every cent." The voice laughed bitterly. "Money? This was never about money." "Then what?" A pause. "Pain," the voice said softly. "The kind you gave me. The kind that lingers. You took everything from me, Richard. Now I take it back. One heartbeat at a time." The sound cut off. Richard stood slowly, his weapon still raised, but the attacker was gone. Only the mannequin remained, and dangling from its hand, a new note. He took it, hands trembling. "You're too late. The stars have moved." He turned to run. Back in the apartment, June sat in silence until a knock rattled the door. She opened it slowly. A package waited at her feet. Inside, Amelia's shoe and a note. "You're next." June stared down at the shoe in her trembling hands. Small, worn, unmistakably Amelia's. It still had the pink ribbon she'd tied into the laces last week, a tiny heart sticker barely clinging to the heel. Her stomach twisted, nausea rising like a tide. The note that came with it sat on the kitchen table, 4 words scrawled in ink that bled through the paper. "You're next. Stay quiet." Her fingers hovered above her phone, the urge to call Richard overpowering. But the warning echoed louder. She looked toward the window, suddenly feeling exposed. Were they watching now? Had they been watching this entire time? She took a shaky breath and locked the front door, then pulled every curtain shut. Her thoughts raced. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was personal, deliberate. Whoever was behind this didn't just want to punish Richard. They wanted to dismantle everyone connected to him, one thread at a time. She opened the kitchen drawer and pulled out the only weapon she had, a small rusted revolver that had belonged to her father. She hadn't touched it in years, but tonight it gave her some measure of strength. She sat down and reread Amelia's hidden message. "If I get lost, follow the stars." The first clue had led them to the warehouse. But now, the stars have moved. What did that mean? Were there more constellations? More locations? Her eyes landed on a crumpled sketch pinned to the fridge, Amelia's drawing. She'd done it 2 weeks ago, after a walk through the neighborhood, a map of their block with little doodles of her favorite spots, and near the corner a star symbol drawn in purple crayon. Beneath it, "Our secret garden." June's breath caught. The community garden, abandoned last year, had been Amelia's hideout when she was scared or sad. It was fenced off now, but she'd snuck in once or twice with June, claiming the flowers there talked nicer than people. It was worth a look. She folded the drawing, tucked the revolver into her coat, and left through the back stairs, staying in the shadows. Meanwhile, across town, Richard stood in his office watching his legal team sweep the warehouse blueprints for clues. The attack had shaken him, but he refused to let fear win. A single thread in the attacker's message haunted him. "The kind you gave me." What kind of pain had Voss suffered? What had Richard missed in his past that now threatened his future? His phone buzzed. Unknown number. This time, it was a video. Live. The screen lit up with a dimly lit room. Amelia sat tied to a chair, unharmed but visibly exhausted. Her eyes were red, her voice small as she whispered something to the person filming. "I know he'll come," he promised. The camera panned away. 2 o'clock. A countdown had begun. 36:14:07, a voice followed. "Time's ticking, Harrington." And then it cut to black. June reached the garden just after 1 a.m., heart pounding as she crept through the rusted gate. Weeds had overtaken the once beautiful sanctuary, but the stone benches and faded mosaic path still peeked through the overgrowth. Moonlight spilled across the broken cobblestone, casting eerie shadows. The garden had been Amelia's escape, a pocket of peace tucked between concrete and sirens. If there were more clues, they'd be here. She moved slowly, scanning the bushes and the mural along the brick wall, the same one she and Amelia had painted 2 summers ago. Stars, flowers, and one figure standing beneath the night sky. A little girl holding up a lantern. It was childish and colorful, but something about it struck June as strange now. She stepped closer. At the base of the mural, barely visible in the dark, was a symbol drawn in charcoal, another star. But this one had a line slashed through it, like it had been crossed out. Beneath it, a note was taped in place. She pulled it free with shaking hands and unfolded it. "Wrong star, try again, she believed in you." June's chest tightened. Whoever had left this, they were watching Amelia closely, and they knew her well enough to mock her hope. The note was taunting, calculated. She turned slowly, eyes scanning the dark garden but saw no one. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She jumped, fumbling to answer. "June." Richard's voice was hoarse. "I got another message. A countdown. We've got 36 hours left." "I found another clue," she whispered. "At the garden, another star, but it says it's the wrong one." Richard swore softly on the other end. "They're sending us in circles. Amelia's giving us what she can, but they're twisting it." June bit her lip. "What if the stars aren't just drawings? What if they're people, places we missed?" A pause. "That mural Amelia loved," Richard said suddenly. "She once told me the stars were her way of remembering things, landmarks, safe places." "She called the garden her North Star," June whispered. "Then there's a south, east, and west." They said it at the same time. 4 points. June's mind raced. She used to go to that old laundromat near Parkside. It had the red star graffiti on the back wall. "And I remember she talked about a rooftop," Richard added, "where she watched the 4th of July fireworks, said it was her sky window." "She called it starlight," June recalled. "Then we have our map," Richard said. 4 stars, 4 locations." "But what happens when we find them all?" June asked. Richard's voice dropped low. "Then we find her." Neither noticed the figure stepping out from the shadows of the garden, phone raised, snapping a photo of June. And sending it in a text. "She's close, move her up the list." Richard stood at the rooftop of his office building, the city stretching out like a grid of secrets below him. The countdown from the video replayed in his mind with relentless precision, hours slipping away like sand through his fingers. 35 hours left. 35 hours to decipher a child's trail of stars while staying one step ahead of a maniac who knew how to turn love into a weapon. He had already dispatched a private security team to the laundromat June mentioned, Star 2. June herself was en route to the rooftop Amelia called Starlight. Richard was heading toward the last known point, an abandoned bookstore in Midtown that Amelia had once told him smelled like dreams. It had been her West Star, according to a message she'd written on the back of one of her bracelet tags. Each location wasn't just random, they were memories, touchstones. Places Amelia associated with love, safety, and her mother's stories, her own version of a treasure map. As his driver pulled onto 42nd Street, Richard reviewed the map June had sketched from Amelia's notes. Each point formed a rough square, with the old warehouse, the one from the trap, smack in the middle. He shivered. Was that the final location? The real one? Or was the truth buried even deeper? Meanwhile, June climbed the rusted fire escape to the rooftop. Her flashlight cut through the dark as she reached the top, There, on a brick wall beside a rusted water tank, was a glowing star, painted in reflective spray, invisible until hit with light. Beneath it, written in a child's scrawl, were the words, "If you're reading this, you found my favorite place." June smiled through tears, tracing the edge of the painted star. Then she noticed something new, taped just below the writing, a photo of her, taken from a distance. That night. A fresh note was stapled beside it. "Told you you were next. Enjoy the view." Suddenly her flashlight flickered, then went dead. She backed up, heart hammering. Her phone lit up with a new message. Unknown number. A live video feed opened. June's apartment. The camera pointed at the front door, then slowly turned to her living room, her gun lying useless on the table. Then, her bracelet bag. Gone. The feed cut off. She dialed Richard immediately. "They've been inside my home. Tonight." Watching, they knew I'd come up here. Richard's voice stayed calm, but steel ran beneath the surface. "They're accelerating. They want to make us panic. Stay put. I'll send someone." "No," June said firmly. "They want me scared. I won't give them that." Richard paused. "We're getting close." June looked up at the painted star one last time. Too close, and they know it. She turned to descend, unaware of the gloved figure silently moving along the roof behind her. One step closer. 1 hour less. The abandoned bookstore stood at the corner of a forgotten block in Midtown, its sign hanging crookedly above shattered windows and locked iron gates. Richard stepped out of the SUV, instructing his driver to circle the block every 10 minutes. This wasn't just another checkpoint. It was the last of Amelia's stars, the West Star. If she had left anything here, it would have to be significant. He passed through the broken gate, flashlight in hand, heart thudding louder than his footsteps. Dust and silence filled the store, the air thick with mold and old paper. He remembered this place faintly. He'd bought Rachel her first edition copy of A Wrinkle in Time here, back when things were simpler, before the walls between them had hardened. His light scanned the bookshelves. Many were collapsed. Others loomed like forgotten towers. Toward the back, something caught his eye, a string of bright pink beads tied around a doorknob, Amelia's. He moved toward it and opened the door slowly. It creaked. Inside was a tiny reading nook, once meant for children, now dimly lit by the moon slipping through a skylight. A blanket was folded in the corner. A drawing taped to the wall showed stick figures. A girl, a woman with curly hair, and a man in a suit, all holding hands under stars. At the center of the floor sat a small old teddy bear. Richard dropped to his knees beside it. He recognized it. It had been Rachel's. There was a note folded in the bear's lap. "I hope this gets to you, Grandpa. I know you're scared. I am too. But I believe in you. I left this where Mommy and I used to read. I love you." The words blurred as tears welled in his eyes. He clutched the bear close, overwhelmed by the clarity of Amelia's faith. She was afraid, but still reaching out. Still believing in the man who had only just entered her life. Suddenly another vibration from his phone. A message, a single sentence. "One last star. Come alone, or she disappears forever." A second later, a GPS coordinate followed. He input the location. It was outside the city, a small private property once owned by a shell company that he'd unknowingly bought years ago. A place that had sat empty, forgotten, until now. The final destination, the real trap. He stood bear in hand and turned to leave, just as the front door slammed shut behind him. Locks clicked. From somewhere in the store, an old speaker crackled to life. A voice echoed through the dust. "You found the last star, Richard, but stars don't last forever." He spun around, heart racing, and neither will she. June sat inside a diner 2 blocks from the rooftop, a steaming cup of coffee untouched in front of her. She kept her back to the wall, eyes fixed on the window, every nerve on high alert. After receiving the rooftop message and seeing the live feed of her apartment, She'd followed her instincts, not to hide, but to vanish in plain sight. If they were watching her, she needed to become invisible just long enough to think. She pulled Amelia's drawing from her coat pocket again, laying it flat on the table. 4 stars, 4 memories, all leading to something, somewhere. But they had been manipulated. Used, the path Amelia built with love had been hijacked by someone with cruelty and control, a puppeteer playing with pain. Her phone buzzed with a message from Richard. "I got a new location. Final star. Outside the city. I'm going." She typed back immediately, "Don't. It's a trap." But the message didn't send. No signal. She looked up. Half the lights in the diner were flickering. The waitress at the counter banged the register in frustration. "Damn thing keeps going offline." Then June noticed the car parked across the street. Engine off. Windows tinted. Same one from earlier that day. Her instincts screamed. She grabbed her coat, stuffed the drawing inside, and slipped out the back entrance of the diner, emerging into the alley. Rain had started to fall in thin drizzles, the pavement shining beneath the streetlights. She turned right, heading toward the busier street, then stopped. Blocking her path was a man in a grey hoodie, face hidden. In his hand, Amelia's bracelet bag. Her stomach turned. "You want her back?" the man said softly, voice just above the rain. June's hand moved to her coat, fingers grazing the revolver inside. "She's running out of time." "Where is she?" June demanded. The man smiled beneath his hood. "You'll know soon enough." Then, without warning, he tossed the bracelet bag at her feet and vanished into the shadows. She picked it up, heart pounding. Inside, she found something new, a flash drive. Back in the diner, she plugged it into her phone using a converter she always carried. One file, a video. It opened to a dim room, camera shaky, pointed at Amelia, sitting, unharmed, but pale and tired, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think they're scared of you, Nana. That's why they're doing this." Then the camera panned to a wall, a map, each star location marked, and one more, circled in red, a cabin in the woods, unlisted, unregistered. June gasped. She knew that place. She'd taken Rachel there once, and no one else was supposed to know it existed, not even Richard. Then the video cut out, and June understood the real twist. This wasn't about Richard alone. It was about all of them, and someone very close had betrayed them. The woods stretched endlessly as the black SUV tore down the gravel road, its headlights slicing through the mist. Richard gripped the steering wheel tighter with every mile. The GPS pinged once more. He was close. The final star. The cabin. The place that was never meant to exist in anyone's files, but somehow the enemy had found it. And worse, Amelia had been taken there. He couldn't explain the dread building in his chest. This wasn't just another decoy. This was real. Amelia had left a trail, and for the first time he felt they were closing in on her for real. But what disturbed him more was the message June had tried to send. Don't. It's a trap. He hadn't received it until 20 minutes ago, delayed by some network failure or sabotage. His phone buzzed again, a message from June. Just 3 words. "I know who." He slammed on the brakes, heart thudding. Who? Before he could reply, the GPS chimed. Arrived at destination. The cabin loomed ahead, shrouded in fog and trees. It was exactly as he remembered it, Rachel's getaway spot. She'd stayed here for a week during the final months of her pregnancy. He'd thought it remote enough for her to be safe, even if he hadn't known she was still in the country. Now it was something else entirely. He stepped out cautiously, gun holstered, flashlight in hand. The front door creaked as he pushed it open. Dust danced in the beam of his light. Everything inside was quiet, too quiet. Then a sound, movement, from the back room. He moved forward, heart racing. Another message buzzed on his phone before he reached the door. This time, a video. From the same camera angle as before, Amelia. But something was different. She looked directly at the camera and whispered, "He's not who you think he is. Richard's blood ran cold. The door creaked again, this time behind him. He turned, gun raised. But it wasn't Voss. It was Michael, his most trusted advisor, his right hand at the company for over a decade, the man who knew every account, every deal, and every secret Richard had buried to build his empire. "What the hell are you doing here?" Richard barked. Michael raised his hands, smiling with a kind of calm that chilled the room. "You didn't really think Voss was still pulling the strings, did you?" Richard's stomach dropped. "It's you." Michael stepped forward, calm and steady. "Voss died 4 years ago. You buried him in silence. But I didn't. I watched it all. The downfall, the betrayal, the blood, and I realized..." He stopped, eyes gleaming. "Your empire was built on ruin. Mine will rise on revenge." Richard aimed the gun. "Where is she?" Michael smirked. "She's safe, for now. But the question isn't where she is. It's whether she wants to come back." "What does that mean?" Richard asked, voice shaking. Michael's smile widened. "It means she's starting to believe the truth." Richard's grip tightened on the pistol, knuckles pale, eyes locked on Michael with burning disbelief. "You're lying," he growled. "She's a child. You can't twist her." Michael tilted his head, a mockery of sympathy. "Children are the easiest to reach, Richard, especially when they've already been abandoned once. You think one day with you was enough to erase 8 years of absence? Of questions?" Richard stepped closer, gun raised. "I swear to God, if you've hurt her..." "I haven't laid a finger on her," Michael interrupted smoothly. "I don't need to. I gave her something far more powerful than threats." He paused, letting the words linger. "I gave her answers." Richard's chest heaved. "You're delusional. I'll end this right now." Michael's eyes flicked to the side. "You shoot me, you'll never find her, and the next video you get will be her saying goodbye." Richard froze. Michael smiled again. "That's better. Now let's talk like men. You want your granddaughter back? Good. You'll have to make a choice." Richard's voice was hoarse. "What choice?" Michael gestured to a chair at the small table. "Sit down. I'll explain everything. And if you listen, really listen, you might get to be a grandfather for longer than a single sunrise." Richard hesitated, then sat slowly, gun still pointed at Michael. Michael sat across from him. "Years ago, when you ruined Voss, you didn't just take his fortune, you took his voice, his name, his legacy. I was there when you signed the papers. I saw how you did it, and I waited." "You were just an analyst," Richard spat. Michael chuckled. "I was the man in the back room watching you burn everything in your path. I didn't have a name then, but I do now." He leaned forward. "I'm the man who took Amelia. I'm the one who walked past her on the sidewalk for weeks before you ever knew she existed. I planted the necklaces. I crafted the trail. I made her need to find you." Richard's pulse surged. "Why?" Michael's voice dropped. "Because I wanted to see if you could still love someone who cost you everything." He slid a folder across the table. "Open it." Richard did. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Surveillance images, documents, financial trails, every move he and June had made in the past 2 weeks. And one final page, Amelia's birth certificate. Except the father's name wasn't blank. It read, Michael Barron. Richard's throat dried. "What the hell is this?" "I loved Rachel," Michael said, his voice shaking with emotion for the first time. "She came to me when you threw her out. She was broken, scared. I took her in. And when she died giving birth, I was there." Richard stood abruptly, the chair scraping back. "You're lying." Michael met his eyes, steel beneath the calm. "She's not just your granddaughter, Richard." He stood too slowly. "She's my daughter." The room spun. Richard's vision blurred as the revelation slammed into him like a wrecking ball. Michael, Amelia's father? It made no sense. It couldn't. Rachel had never spoken of him, never mentioned another man, only pain and silence. Yet the papers in his hands told a different story. The birth certificate, the dates, the photos. If they were forged, they were flawless. Michael's voice cut through the fog. "You think I wanted to do this?" he asked almost gently. "I didn't. For years, I watched from the sidelines, waiting for you to come looking for her. But you never did. Not for Rachel. Not for Amelia. I raised her, Richard. Quietly. From a distance, until it was taken from me, too. You kidnapped her," Richard snapped, fury rising again. "You don't get to call that raising." Michael didn't flinch. "And what did you do? You threw her mother out like trash. You buried her memory." "I made mistakes," Richard growled, "but I never stopped loving Rachel." Michael's eyes gleamed. "You have a funny way of showing love." Silence hung thick between them. Richard broke it. "Where is she?" Michael didn't answer at first. Then, with a slow breath, he said, "She's not far, but you don't get to see her, not yet, not until she makes a choice." "What choice?" Richard asked. Michael leaned on the table. "I've told her the truth, about Rachel, about you, about me, and now I'm giving her the chance to choose where she belongs." Richard's jaw clenched. "She's 8 years old." "She's brilliant," Michael snapped. "She's old enough to know who fought for her and who forgot her." "I didn't know she existed." "And now you do," Michael said, voice icy. "So prove you deserve her." Richard stood. "Take me to her. Let her look me in the eye and ask the questions you're too scared to let her ask." Michael stared at him for a long moment, then finally nodded. "I'll take you, but if you say one wrong word, if you even look at her like you're trying to rewrite the truth, this ends." Richard nodded slowly. Michael opened the back door of the cabin and gestured for him to follow. They walked into the woods, branches crunching underfoot, moonlight flickering between the trees. After about 100 paces, they reached another cabin, smaller, barely more than a shed. A light glowed from inside. Michael stepped aside. "She's in there, alone." Richard approached the door, his pulse thundering in his ears. He paused, hand hovering above the knob, then opened it. Inside, on a small cot, sat Amelia, eyes wide, her arms wrapped around the teddy bear. And for a moment, she looked scared, not of where she was, but of him. Richard stepped into the cabin slowly, the door creaking shut behind him. The space was warm, quiet, almost too still. Amelia sat on the cot with her knees tucked to her chest, clutching the bear he'd found at the bookstore. Her eyes were wide, watchful, unsure. She looked smaller than before. Less like the bright child selling bracelets on the sidewalk, and more like a lost girl waiting to be told who she was supposed to trust. He lowered himself onto the floor, leaving a gap between them. He didn't speak at first, didn't dare. He just watched her. The fire crackled softly in the corner. The seconds stretched out, heavy with unspoken truth. Finally, Amelia broke the silence. "He said you didn't want me." Richard's breath caught. "I didn't even know you existed, sweetheart." "He said you kicked Mama out," she added, her voice flat like she was repeating someone else's pain. "That you were mad because she loved someone you didn't like." Richard nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "That part is true." She looked at him sharply. "So you did send her away?" He leaned forward slightly. "Yes. And I've regretted it every single day since." Amelia hugged the bear tighter. "He said I was safer without you." Richard blinked through the sting in his eyes. "He's not wrong about that either. Not back then. I was proud, stubborn. I hurt your mama because I didn't want to admit I was wrong. But now I would give everything I have to go back and make it right." She stared at him for a long moment. "Did you love her?" she asked. "With all my heart," Richard said softly. "Even when I was angry. Even when I didn't understand. She was my little girl. Just like you are now." Amelia's lip trembled. "He says I'm his little girl." Richard didn't flinch. "He helped your mama. I won't lie about that. But being a father, being family, it's more than blood. It's showing up. It's listening. It's saying sorry when you mess up." He reached into his coat and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He placed it on the floor between them. Amelia leaned forward cautiously and unwrapped it. A framed picture. Her mother, Rachel, young and laughing in the sunlight, holding a tiny baby bundled in pink. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes. "She looks like me," she whispered. "She was brave like you too," Richard said. "She wanted to protect you from pain, even if it meant I never met you." Amelia looked up, something shifting in her face. "Do you think she'd want me to forgive you?" Richard's voice cracked. "I think she'd want you to choose who loves you the best, not who says the right thing, but who shows it." A silence hung, sacred and still. Then a knock tapped at the door. Richard stood slowly, protective now. He opened it. Michael stood there, not alone. 2 men in black tactical gear flanked him. "Time's up," Michael said coldly. "She's coming with me." Amelia stood from the cot, torn, tears rolling down her cheeks, caught between 2 pasts, and one impossible choice. Amelia stood frozen, the warmth of the cabin behind her, the cold bite of the night air in front. Her small hand tightened around the photo of her mother. She looked at Richard, his eyes glassy, jaw clenched, standing between her and the men outside. Then she turned to Michael, whose smile was now too wide, too patient. The mask of kindness he wore so carefully was beginning to crack. "You said I could choose," Amelia said quietly, voice trembling. Michael nodded. "Yes, but it's not safe here anymore. We need to go." Richard didn't move. "She stays here until she decides." One of the men behind Michael stepped forward. "She's coming. Now." Michael lifted a hand to stop him. "No, let her speak." Amelia took a shaky breath. "You told me he left Mama." "I did," Michael said softly. "You told me he didn't want me. I said he didn't know about you until it was too late." Her voice rose. "You made it sound like he was the villain." Michael's gaze tightened just slightly. "Because he was. Once. But he told the truth," she said, "even when it hurt." Michael's tone turned urgent. "Amelia, I found the stars," she interrupted. "I left the clues. I believed he would come." Her hand drifted to her necklace, the tiny blue stone glinting in the firelight. And he did. The wind rustled the trees behind them. Richard exhaled slowly, his chest heavy with both dread and fragile hope. Michael took a step closer. "I raised you, Amelia. I protected you." Amelia nodded slowly, tears spilling from her eyes. "You also lied to me." She turned and walked to Richard's side, took his hand. The silence cracked like thunder. Michael stared at them, disbelief etching across his face. "She's a child, she doesn't understand." "She understands better than either of us," Richard said. "Now leave." Michael's jaw tensed. "You think this is over?" Richard pulled Amelia behind him. "If you come near her again, I'll make sure your name disappears from every record, every building, every breath. You'll be a ghost in your own story." Michael's voice turned venomous. "You have no idea what you've just done." Then he turned to the men behind him. "Plan B." But before they could move, bright beams of headlights flared through the trees. Engines roared. Dozens of vehicles emerged. SUVs, unmarked cars, lights flashing. June burst from the lead vehicle, gun drawn, yelling, "Put your hands up." Michael froze. His soldiers hesitated, then slowly obeyed. June ran to Amelia, arms wide. The little girl flew into her embrace, sobbing into her shoulder. Richard stood beside them, his breath shaking. June turned to Michael as he was cuffed by agents. "You forgot something," she said, fire in her voice. "She's not just your daughter. She's Rachel's," Richard said. "And Rachel always knew who she could trust." Michael didn't respond. He didn't have to. The sound of steel slamming shut said enough. But even as the night closed in and the cabin emptied, Richard knew it wasn't over. Because trust could be earned. But love? Love still had to be proven. And Amelia had one more question left to ask. 3 weeks later, the world outside had moved on. The headlines that once screamed of kidnappings and betrayals had faded into whispers, but inside Richard's penthouse, time moved differently, slower, cautious. He stood by the window watching the city breathe beneath him, one hand wrapped around a cup of tea he hadn't touched. Behind him, laughter echoed faintly from the hallway. Amelia's voice. It still caught him by surprise. She was here, alive, safe, but not yet fully his. She and June had been staying in the guest wing. Richard had offered them everything, security, space, time, but he'd made no demands. Every day he waited to be invited. Every night he stared at the ceiling, wondering if she'd knock or ask him to read her a story or sit beside her while she braided her bracelets. Sometimes she did, sometimes she didn't. Grief had left its fingerprints on both of them. He heard footsteps now, small ones, hesitant. Amelia appeared in the doorway, her pajamas wrinkled, hair messy from sleep. He turned to face her, heart suddenly too large for his chest. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Bad dreams." "Me too," he said, and sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. "Want to talk about it?" She walked over and curled beside him without answering. After a moment, she whispered, "In the dream, I was back in the room, the one with the mattress. But you didn't come this time." He reached over, letting his hand hover, then gently placed it on her shoulder. "But I did." She looked up at him. "Why? Why come for me when you could have just stayed safe?" He smiled sadly. "Because I already lost your mom. I wasn't going to lose you too." She studied his face. "You really didn't know about me?" "No," he said, voice cracking. "But not knowing doesn't mean I didn't fail you." Amelia was quiet for a long time. Then, from the pocket of her hoodie, she pulled out a bracelet, woven in silver and blue, the colors of their twin necklaces. She held it out to him. "For you," she said. Richard stared, stunned. "You made this?" She nodded. He slipped it onto his wrist slowly, reverently. "It's beautiful. I called it forgiveness," she said. A tear slid down his cheek. "Amelia." She leaned against him, head on his arm. "I don't know everything yet, but I know I don't want to lose anyone else." He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, holding her gently. "You won't." The moment stretched, warm and fragile, but just as he began to relax, a knock echoed from the front door. Amelia sat up, startled. "Are you expecting someone?" Richard frowned. "No." He stood and walked to the door, opening it cautiously. There stood a woman in her 30s with dark, serious eyes. She held up a badge. "My name is Agent Monroe. I need to speak to you. It's about Michael Barron." Richard's heart dropped. "What about him?" Her expression was grim. "He escaped custody this morning." The words echoed through Richard's marble foyer like gunfire. "He escaped custody this morning." Richard's blood ran cold. "How? When?" Agent Monroe stepped inside, glancing briefly at Amelia, who stood watching from behind the couch, her eyes wide. The agent lowered her voice, firm but measured. Transport van was intercepted during a scheduled relocation to federal holding. 2 officers injured, 1 still missing. Barron is off-grid. June appeared from the hallway, drawn by the tension. "You said he was locked down," she snapped. "He was," Monroe replied, "but someone with clearance rerouted his file. This wasn't a simple breakout, it was planned, from inside." Richard rubbed his forehead, a storm brewing behind his eyes. "What does he want now?" Monroe hesitated. "We believe his objective hasn't changed." She looked toward Amelia. Protective instincts surged through Richard. He stepped between them. "He's not getting near her again." Monroe nodded. "We're assigning agents to the building. All exits, all cameras monitored. But with respect, Mr. Harrington, you need to prepare for the possibility that he's not coming straight for her." June's voice was sharp. "What does that mean?" Monroe glanced between them. "Barron's not just a man with a vendetta. He's methodical, psychological. He knows how to twist truth into weapons. He might not try to take her. He might try to turn her again. Amelia's voice rang out clear and steady. He won't. All eyes turned to her. She stepped forward, small but unflinching. He lied to me. I believed him because I was scared, not because he loved me. Monroe softened slightly. That's good, sweetheart. That's important. Amelia looked at Richard. But if he comes back, we have to be ready. He knelt to her level, gripping her hands. We are. I promise you, I won't let him hurt you again. She nodded, then whispered, I want to help. If he comes for me, I want to be the one who stops him. June's voice cracked. Baby, no. Richard held up a hand. Let her speak. Amelia reached into her hoodie and pulled out another bracelet. This one was black and silver, coiled tight, with a tiny GPS bead woven into the middle. I made this one for me, she said, so you can always find me. Richard blinked. When did you... After, she said simply. Just in case. Monroe crouched beside her. That's incredibly smart. If Baron contacts you again, through messages, videos, anything, you show us, okay? Amelia nodded solemnly. Monroe rose and turned to Richard. I'll have agents posted by nightfall, but be warned, if Baron has help, he might not come through the front door. Richard's jaw tightened. Then we'll make sure every door is locked. Monroe turned to leave. But as she reached the elevator, she paused. One more thing. Baron left something behind when he escaped, a note. She handed it to Richard. It read, You took my daughter. Now I take your name. June looked at Richard. What does that mean? He read the words again, then whispered, It means he's going after everything. Richard stood at the edge of the penthouse balcony as the sun bled into the skyline, the note crumpled tightly in his hand. You took my daughter. Now I take your name. Those words rang louder than any courtroom sentence. He knew exactly what Michael meant now. It wasn't just about Amelia anymore. It was about legacy, identity, and destruction from within. Behind him, the atmosphere in the penthouse had shifted. June was on the phone with the federal task force, coordinating details about Amelia's protection. Amelia herself sat in the corner, headphones in, sketching in her notebook, her way of processing, retreating, surviving. Richard turned, scanning his home with a strategist's eye. Every inch of his life was exposed now, every secret he'd buried, every deal he'd made, every enemy he'd silenced. If Michael wanted to take his name, he'd go after what it stood for, his company, his reputation, his empire. June, Richard said, voice cutting through the room. We need to call an emergency board meeting. June hung up quickly. You think he's going corporate? I think he already has, Richard said grimly. He worked with me for 10 years. He knows the systems, the structure, the passwords we don't even use anymore. If he's planning to erase me, it starts with Harrington Holdings. Just then, his phone vibrated with an alert. Email breach attempt, then another, and another. He raced to his laptop, logging into the secure server. The company's mainframe was flashing red, internal firewalls under siege. He activated the emergency protocol, locking down access points. But files were disappearing. Not stolen, erased. June looked over his shoulder. Can you stop it? I don't know, Richard said, fingers flying across the keys. He's not trying to steal money. He's deleting contracts, agreements, proof that I ever owned anything. Suddenly the screen went black. A new window opened. Michael's face. Live feed. Hello again, Richard. Richard clenched his jaw. You really think this makes you win? Michael's smile was calm. I don't need to win. I just need you forgotten. You'll go to prison for this. I already was in prison, Michael replied. You put me there the moment you claimed my daughter. Amelia appeared behind Richard, hearing everything now. She walked up beside him, eyes fixed on the screen. Michael's face shifted when he saw her. Hi, sweetheart. Amelia stared at him. Then, without flinching, she leaned into the mic. I'm not your daughter. Silence. Then she added, voice low and sure, "You're not even my memory." Michael's smile cracked. Richard reached forward and shut the laptop. The screen went dark, and with it a part of Michael's power. But outside, a different screen flickered to life. In a downtown office tower, a news broadcast began. Breaking. Scandal at Harrington Holdings. Billionaires' files leak exposing illegal offshore deals. More at 11. Richard stared at the television in stunned silence. Michael's war had gone public, and now the world was watching. The boardroom was a furnace of tension. The long mahogany table surrounded by stone-faced executives, news still rippling through their phones. The leak had exploded, Richard's name trending worldwide. His companies facing scrutiny, contracts frozen, partners pulling out. Some were shocked, others furious. A few, he suspected, quietly celebrating. He stood at the head of the table, Amelia's bracelet still on his wrist, hands clenched. "I didn't leak those files," he said plainly. "And most of them are fabricated. The rest were taken out of context intentionally." "Intentional or not," snapped one board member, "we've lost 2 international investors, our stock is in free fall, and regulators are circling like vultures." Another chimed in, "If this gets worse, we could be looking at criminal exposure, tax fraud, securities violations." Richard held his ground. "I've launched an internal audit. I have cyber forensics combing through the breach. And I'll go public with a statement by tonight." "You mean another statement?" a woman said sharply. "The last one sounded like you were choking on guilt." The room rumbled with uncomfortable agreement. Then the general counsel spoke. "There's a move we can make. It's aggressive but clean. You resign. Step down as CEO, effective immediately." "No," Richard said instantly. "This isn't about you," she continued. "It's about protecting the company, the brand." He looked at them, men and women who had once toasted him with champagne and built their careers in his shadow. Now, they wouldn't meet his eyes. "You want to save the company?" he said quietly. "Fine, I'll step down." Shocked murmurs filled the room. "But if I walk," Richard continued, "you do not sweep this under the rug. You don't pretend this was some internal glitch. You tell the world it was sabotage. You show them what a man with nothing left can do." He left the room before they could reply, his exit as silent as it was seismic. Back at the penthouse, June waited with Amelia by the window. When Richard walked in, his face said everything. "They're making you quit?" June asked. "I offered it," he replied. Amelia stood. "But that was your whole life." Richard knelt in front of her. "No, you're my whole life now." She blinked back tears. "What are we going to do?" He looked at both of them. "We're going to show the world who we are." Not the version Michael tried to rewrite, but the real one. Amelia opened her notebook. "I made something," she said. She held up a drawing, 3 stars joined in a triangle. "Me, you, and Nana June. We're a new family, like a constellation." Richard smiled through the ache. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with a new message. No number, no signature, just 5 words. "This ends where it began." And attached, an address. One Richard hadn't seen in years, Rachel's childhood home. Burned down, long abandoned, but still standing, waiting. The address burned into Richard's mind as he stood once again before the ruins of Rachel's childhood home. The house was exactly as he remembered, its charred skeleton reaching toward the sky like a warning. The fire had claimed most of it 8 years ago, shortly after Rachel disappeared. Investigators had ruled it accidental. But now, standing on the edge of what was once his daughter's haven, Richard saw it differently. It was a stage. Set for a finale, he moved cautiously through the warped front gate, every step stirring ash and memory. His flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing fragments of the past, scorched picture frames, a melted wind chime, the faint outline of a swing set still rusting in the yard. Then he heard it, a soft, low sound like humming. He followed it, heart thundering. Inside, beneath the collapsed beams of what used to be the living room, sat a single chair, and in it, a figure. Michael. Alone. No guards, no screens, just a man in a grey coat, the shadows flickering across his face. "You came," he said quietly, not looking up. Richard stepped closer, gun holstered, but hand ready. "This ends tonight." Michael nodded. "Yes, I wanted it here, where everything started." Richard stared. "You burned this house." Michael looked up slowly. "Rachel told me she was going to leave, take Amelia, and vanish. I couldn't lose them. Not after what you did." "You burned it with her inside?" Richard hissed. "No," Michael said, eyes hollow. "She'd already gone. I thought, maybe if I destroyed the past, the future would stay with me." Richard was silent for a long time. Then, "You destroyed her instead." Michael flinched. "I raised Amelia the only way I knew. I gave her orders, stories, rules. You gave her dreams." "And now she's choosing her own," Richard said. Michael smiled faintly. "She chose you." He pulled something from his coat, a bracelet. The one Amelia had made for him before she knew the truth. "I just wanted one thing," Michael whispered. "To matter. To someone." Richard looked at him, the firelight from the broken hearth glinting across the walls. "You did," he said. "You just lost yourself trying to hold on." Michael nodded, slowly, then reached into his pocket again. Richard's hand flew to his holster, but it wasn't a weapon. It was a phone. He set it down, unlocked. On screen, a live feed of Amelia, safe, sleeping. Back at the penthouse. Richard stared. "How?" "I never stopped watching," Michael murmured. "Even when I ran, I just needed to know she was okay." Then he turned the phone off and slid it across the floor. "I'm done," he whispered. "No more tricks, no more lies." Richard didn't respond. He just stepped forward and placed a second bracelet, Amelia's newest, beside the phone. A circle closed. Back at the penthouse, Amelia stirred from sleep. June sat beside her, holding her hand. And when Amelia opened her eyes, she whispered, "It's over, isn't it?" June smiled softly. "Yes, baby, it's finally over." Outside, the stars began to rise, and somewhere in the city, a new constellation took shape. 3 points of light, forged by truth, held together by love.